Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the daily War Room Briefing from the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I'm Maurice Hirsch, joined today by the president of the JCPA, Dr. Dan Dijker. Really what we need to open up with is the major news of today. For the first time in 89 days since the start of the war, the major news is not from Gaza. The major news today is really from the north and from the east. In the north, we had two substantial events last night. The first one being the targeted killing of Saleh al-Arouri, the deputy head of the Hamas political bureau, one of the archi-terrorists implicated and involved personally in the attack on the October 7th, and also in many, many previous attacks, including the kidnapping and murder of the three teens in Gush Etzion in 2014. He was the head of the whole branch of Hamas that dealt with terrorism, not only in the Gaza Strip, but also in Judea and Samaria. He was killed last night with other senior Hamas members. The other major incident, obviously in Iran, to the east, the bomb that exploded at the gravesite of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Forces, who was targeted in 2020 by the Americans and killed by an American drone. Today, at his gravesite on the anniversary of his death, another bomb exploded, killing many people there. Those really are the two central events of what's going on. Obviously, the fighting in the Gaza Strip has carried on, and that's something which is obviously important to note. The finding yesterday of a launching area for long-range weapons, long-range rockets, right adjacent to a UNRWA school. These are just part of the things that all of these UN organizations seem to have ignored again, and turned a blind eye. Anything that you would like to really say about that? They did everything they could just not to say anything whatsoever. And so today, moving on quickly, we are joined with our honored guest, with Dr. Mordechai Kedar, really a specialist in the Middle East, a specialist in Islam, someone who is often said to know Islam better than most Muslims. And he's going to be joining us today to discuss what are all the implications of all of these different things going on. We saw yesterday in the north for the first time also Israeli forces responding in Syria to Iranian militia forces sent to Syria, also attacking and taking credit for attacking Syrian army forces. Moti, give us an update on what's going on. How can we see all of this? Where's it coming from? I mean, we understand that it's coming from Iran, but put all of those pieces into place for us, please.
Well, Maurice, thank you for having me here. What happened yesterday, the killing of Saleh al-Arouri in Beirut, and what happened today near the graveyard of Qasem Soleimani in Iran, in Kerman in Iran, is actually very short thread combines between the two events. We are talking about two arch terrorists. One is Iranian, in Qasem Soleimani, and the other one is operated by Iran, as Hamas is, Saleh al-Arouri, whose death is welcomed by many people. Those who carried out the terror attack or the attack on the gravesite or graveyard of Qasem Soleimani actually expressed their resentment against the Iranian regime, against the Iranian ruling of Iran, because in Iran there are many oppositions against the government. First of all, you have, even within the Persian minority of Iran, people who want to get rid of the Ayatollahs, let alone the other minorities, the Azeris, the Baluchis, the Kurds, and the Turkmens, who also hate this regime. So they have a good reason why to perform such an attack on the grave place of Qasem Soleimani. Add to this that in Iran, many of the other minorities, means not the Persians, I'm talking about the Azeris, the Kurds, the Arabs, the Baluch, the Turkmens, and there are more, actually want freedom from the Iranian state. They want to divide Iran into ethnic states, just like what happened in the Soviet Union, which was divided to 15 ethnic states, or Yugoslavia, or Czechoslovakia, which all were fragmented to ethnic units. And they are rather stable until this very day. The same thing in Iran, and Iran is multi-ethnic state, and many of the ethnicities which are not Persians do not want to live under the yoke of the Persians, and they could also be behind such a blast in the graveyard of Qasem Soleimani. So Iran also today, since Iran is playing with fire of the terror all over the Middle East, now this fire of terror actually attacked Iran, as we see. What happened yesterday in Beirut is the same thing. The one who is involved to its teeth in terror against Israel, the time came for him to be rid of by an attack. Why should he be safe after he is arranging the death to so many people, Israelis mainly?
Dr. Kedar, hi, Dan Diker. Thanks you very much for joining. Moti, I'd like to zoom in on the psychological warfare aspect of what happened last night, the assassination of al-Arouri, and today's major explosion in Kerman. Can we argue that from a point of view of psychological warfare and Israeli deterrence, this has been one of the most consequential moments since the beginning of the 89-day war, certainly since the massacre of Israelis back in October 7?
Well, if you want to understand what happened in Iran, just imagine that in Har Herzl Mount, in the graveyard of the founding fathers of the state of Israel, there is such an explosion which kills 50 or even more people. What will it do to the Israeli mindset? Or you can compare it to such an attack in Arlington in the United States, in the graveyard of the founding fathers. So just imagine, what will it do to the American mindset, to the American stability, or the feeling of security in America if such a thing happens in the Pentagon or in the Capitol Hill, or okay, this is the same thing, because the graveyard of Qasem Soleimani is like a shrine when it comes to Iran. So definitely compared to the Arlington graveyard or Har Herzl here in Jerusalem. So this is actually the meaning of what happened in Iran. What happened in Beirut is even worse, because the man, Saleh al-Arouri, was actually taking refuge in the Dahia, in the southern suburb of Beirut, where Hezbollah is actually centered, where Hassan Nasrallah lives, and all the activists and the heads of Hezbollah. And he thought that if he is living there, not in a Christian environment, not in a Druze environment, not in any other, but under the wings of the Shi'i organization Hezbollah, he is protected because nobody will hurt him. And it turned to be that in this refuge, in this safe house, which he had in the Dahia, there, whoever killed him succeeded to do it in a very decisive way with some more activists of Hamas in Lebanon. This is a message, first of all, not to Hamas. This is a message to Hassan Nasrallah, because whoever carried it out, it actually tells Nasrallah, hey guy, you are not safe even in the Dahia. You better watch it. You better stay under the ground. You better be very careful because we are behind you. And just then listen, the fact that whoever did it knew about the man, where he is, in what floor of the building, and it means that whoever did it has spies inside the Dahia, inside that place. Means could be that people who appear to be good Shia members of Hezbollah who are well mingling within the population, they actually are collaborators with somebody who is not so much for the Shia and for Hezbollah. And this actually brings suspicion between each other. They cannot speak to each other because maybe the other guy with whom you try to speak, maybe he's the one who brought the information to the alleged Israelis who did it. So this is the effect of what happened last night is tremendous from this point of view.
This is a very, very important exclamation point you placed on the discussion, Moti, and I want to continue down this road of the regionalization of this conflict, meaning it is already a regional conflict. In the Knesset yesterday, as a matter of fact, Moti, you were supposed to have been in this Knesset gathering. Your name card was unfortunately empty. You were probably at another engagement, but we had it was called the Hamas Israel caucus, warfare caucus in the Knesset, and what came up there was the notion that was brought forth by two visiting Iranians in the opposition, Vahid Beheshti and his wife Mati Heaven from the UK, who said, "Listen, guys, this is the Iranian regime octopus at war with Israel, and the psychological effect of imagining an octopus with tentacles in Hamas, with tentacles in Lebanon and Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen, as well as in Gaza, as well as in many other fronts, is really the correct way of looking at this war." Having said that, what we're seeing in Hezbollah is it a deterrent message to Hassan Nasrallah, meaning you better push Hezbollah beyond the Litani River, which is UN Security Council's Resolution 1701 from the 2006 war, or is it another message saying we know where you are and where Israel is on its way to launching a major operation in Lebanon, which seems to be unavoidable?
Well, I think that the 1701 decision, which actually pushes Hezbollah, or the forces of Hezbollah to the north of the Litani, is definitely not enough, because the distance between the Litani and the borders of Israel can be crossed within 15 minutes. If these people try or are willing to cross the border to Israel. And this is why, in my humble view, this is the minimum which Israel should demand, that the ground forces of Hezbollah will be pushed up north to the north from the Litani. But believe me, it is really not enough. And we saw how these vehicles, even if they use different vehicles, they can cross this border with us within 15 minutes from decision. So we have to be very careful and maybe update the 1701 decision to something which will provide more security to the state of Israel. Otherwise, we'll have to continue fighting.
Moti, one of the things I want to zoom in on here is this notion that I think has been lost on a lot of people in the Western discourse in the United States, perhaps not the people on this call, because if you see the list of the people on this call, it's a very educated and very, very invested audience. But the point here is that it seems that it is only a matter of time before Israel must launch a major operation in Lebanon, because there's no way that Israel can countenance a situation by which the Iranian regime, the IRGC, instructing the Hezbollah with 180 or 190,000 rockets, drones, killer tunnels, that basically look like a copy-paste of what has happened in the Iranian-backed Hamas situation in Gaza. So can you weigh in on whether we really are looking at something that is imminent, or is it a direct confrontation that's avoidable in the north, in your view?
Well, I think that instead of struggling with the tentacles of the octopus, we should aim at its head and its brains. And this is actually what happens in Tehran. Because if Iran collapses, the proxies will feel much less comfortable to mess with Israel. As long as Iran remains as it is, it's the easiest thing for them to mess with Israel, and Israel cannot live in such a way. In my humble view, Israel and other forces in the West, which view Iran as the real threat, and Israel is not alone in this issue, we should push and support the minorities in Iran to continue the rebellion and to even escalate the rebellion against the central regime in order to fragment Iran to ethnic states. There are enough people, enough millions of people in Iran who are sick and tired from not from the regime, but from the state which occupy them, especially the Ahwazis, the Arabs in the southwest part of Iran, and the Baluchis, and the Kurds, and the Turkmens, and the Azeris. There are enough people who want Iran to be fragmented and to have independence from the Persian yoke, which was forced on them like 100 years ago and less. And this is what the West should encourage, the fragmentation of Iran, because if this happens, the Iranian problem will, at least for a while, will disappear, just like what happened with the Soviet Union, which the world has some good years of some kind of security from the Soviet Union after it collapsed in the end of the 80s. Okay, later Putin rebuilt the Russian empire, and now they are a problem. But if the world wants at least 10 or 20 years of stability and security from the Iranian regime, the world, the civilized world, should push Iran into a civil war or civil struggle, as we saw already 3 years ago. And if the West would have supported the minorities in Iran, especially the Arabs and the Kurds, who really fought for freedom, not only to change the regime, they want to fragment Iran along the ethnic lines, which are very clear in Iran, and to establish an Arab state in the Arabistan, or Khuzestan as they call it, in a Kurdish state in Kurdistan, in Iran, and so forth. This is the solution, the real solution for the Iranian problem, and not only struggling with the tentacles in Lebanon, in Yemen, or in Gaza, or in other places.
Very interesting, Moti, because your analysis here about your suggested decentralization within Iran is similar to your Islamic Emirates school of thought regarding the Palestinian issue, which you've been arguing for many, many years. I want to turn for a moment together with Maurice and ask Maurice, because I've been dominating your brain here but I do want to turn to Gaza for a minute. Yesterday in the Knesset, Moti, there was the discussion about what they call the day after, Yom Acharei in Hebrew. And in fact, there were all sorts of recommendations and suggestions for the day after in Gaza, for everything ranging from Israel actually annexing Gaza and to Israel separating from Gaza completely, as it did not do in 2005. And is it possible to have local families, district by district, managing Gaza itself with its own security apparatus, with Israel and Egypt sharing national security responsibilities, and in a way what they call denazifying, if you will, or de-radicalizing Gaza, but not annexing Gaza, but trying to de-Hamasify, denazify Gaza as we move forward down this pathway that we really haven't been there before since 1948, frankly, and when Gaza had been ruled by the Egyptians.
Well, the population in Gaza, if we take the situation until the war, is rather clannish, because clans usually live in one compound, and the behavior and the management of the place was actually managed by Hamas according to the family or extended family lines. And there are many signs to this, and this is how the population is arranged in Gaza. By the way, in many places in the Arab world as well. In the Arab world, if you base any kind of governance on local families, local clans, usually you get stable situation because people are obedient, people know their status, people know what to do and especially what not to do. And there is we call it Bala Bait, means there is somebody who tells the others what to do, and they usually obey. This is the sheikh of the family, and this is how it works in Middle Eastern societies in many places. And just like in the Gulf states, as you know, the Gulf Emirates are based, each and every one of them is based on one family. Kuwait is the family of al-Sabah. Qatar is al-Thani. Dubai is al-Maktoum. Saudi Arabia is al-Saud. Abu Dhabi, al-Nahyan, and so forth. When you establish a state on a family, under an extended family, you get a normal state, usually peaceful state, which minds its security, its stability, economy, and so forth. While if you base a state on a conglomerate of tribes, of clans, of ethnic groups like Kurds and Arabs and other Turkmens, or religious groups like Muslims, Christians, and Yazidis, and so forth, or sectarian groups like Sunni and Shia, if you include many groups in one state, you get a failing state. And this is what I mean by establishing units based on clans, and each clan rules itself. And this is actually just like it's emulating of the Emirate paradigm, which works very well in the Arab world. What can I do? This is the culture. This region is not Europe and it's not America. Here, the mechanisms of sociology are Middle Eastern. And if you go along with them, you have some hope to establish normal states like in the Gulf. If you go against the cultural lines of the region, you get mayhems like Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, Sudan, and Libya. And this is what my recommendation for Gaza as well. If and when the Gazan population comes back or goes back to its places, live in tents for a while until they rebuild their houses. Meanwhile, if the society is being reconstructed as it was until the war, you can definitely rely on the clans, give them the support, give them the food or whatever you bring, the humanitarian aid, and they will know very well how to deal with this, how to distribute it in a way which will be acceptable by the people, because they know how to speak to their people and how to control their people. This is the only way how to achieve some kind of stability, especially in Gaza after the earthquake, I would say, which Hamas created in Gaza, which caused the fleeing of like almost 1.5 million people to the southern part of Gaza.
Within that clan context there, Moti, to what extent can we see people and already identify people who could take that leading role, who could replace all of that Hamas mechanism on the one hand, and on the other hand also have the ability to coordinate with Israel? To what extent are those people diehard Islamist Hamasniks and supporters of Iran, or to what extent do they simply believe in the right of the Gazans to live their lives?
Well, it all depends on the end of the war. If Israel succeeds to get rid of Hamas altogether, means the military wing and the civil side of Hamas as well, the clans can feel free and safe to do what they want, even if it goes along with the Israeli interests. However, if Israel does not finish the job and fighters of Hamas remain with their weapons and with their ability to target people, the clans will not replace the Hamas because they are simply afraid for their lives. And this is, therefore, the solution of the clan depends actually on how decisive Israel will be when it comes to the question of getting rid of Hamas or not.
So carrying on that note, I understand obviously that crushing Hamas is an integral part of Israel's plan, at least, and the importance of that not only for the future of Gaza but also for our regional deterrence. To what extent could that idea also be adopted to Judea and Samaria? Before October 7th, we were everyone was discussing what would be the next step of the Palestinian Authority. We at the JCPA held a conference that you attended as well on this idea of, well, 30 years to the Oslo Accords, they've clearly failed. Something else needs to be done. We can't keep on banging our heads against that broken wall. So can that idea also be adopted to Judea and Samaria? And obviously there we have the complexities of Hamas, Fatah, and all of the other things coming in. But on the other hand, we also have clearly defined areas that we could separate off and ensure that we could implement that same idea of a confederate idea that I know that Dan has discussed quite extensively previously. Is that something that you think could work?
Well, there are unfortunately some people here in Israel and in Washington, D.C., who still think that the PA can replace Hamas, hoping that the PA will be friendly to Israel. Let me show you two things which will convince everyone. First of all, this is the scarf of Hamas, of the Hamas branch of Birzeit University. Look at the logo, which is very clear, very clear. You can see here the land. This is Metula, this is Eilat, and this the whole country means Hamas, means that this is all Palestine, from the river to the sea. Okay, and this is a verse from the Quran, which orders them to maintain terror against the enemies of Allah. So here you can see the entire state, which is Palestine. Israel has no place to be in this land. The PA produces this scarf, and it's the PA flag. And this is Palestine. It says Palestine here, from the river to the sea. Okay? So what exactly is the difference between from the river to the sea of Hamas and from the river to the sea of the PA? And they don't
There is, as we know, no difference whatsoever.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
Here's what I'm saying. Those who think that the PA can replace Hamas, it's from our point of view, there is absolutely no difference between both organizations. Don't see Israel as a legitimate entity and are therefore vowed to get rid of it. Hamas might be more hasty, and the PA might have some more time until they have a state, until they have money, until they have weapons, until they have ammunition, until they are trained enough, and they will do to Israel what Hamas did on October 7th. And this is the only difference, the timeline, which is different between the PA and the Hamas. In the principle, there is absolutely no difference between these two approaches and between these two organizations. Therefore, we have to look for something else, not Hamastan and not Fatahistan, as Netanyahu keeps saying. And the only thing which can work, and I don't rely on Egypt, and I don't rely on Jordan, and I don't rely on any other one to do the job for us. Therefore, the only solution is the clan solution, both in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza. And this is how Israel should work. This is how Israel should think, to speak in sociology rather than in politics. And sociology of the Palestinians is highly tribal, highly clannish, and therefore this is the situation and this is the solution.
Yeah, also, Moti, it points to another wake-up call to another kind of massacre that occurred on October 7th, and that was the massacre of a conception that Israel is certainly in its military and political establishments had been holding for many, many, many years, which is that Israel was in a territorial conflict as opposed to an ideological religious conflict, which many government leaders from one party to the next kept saying over the years, and you know this very well, and you've been commenting on this for decades. They said, God forbid we should allow this to become a religious conflict, when in fact, from the point of view of the PLO, the Palestinian National Movement, the Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, this has always been a religious conflict from their point of view. And this is, I think, one of the points that girds your clan school of thought, your clan strategy.
You're definitely right. And in my view, the clan solution is the only one which Israel can implement by itself. Israel now doesn't need the support or cooperation with Jordan, which is not guaranteed, not with Egypt, which is also not guaranteed. Therefore, Israel should do what Israel can do by itself. And this is the only solution, is the clan solution or the Emirate solution in other wording, but the essence is the same. I was happy to see that Netanyahu ordered the army to start looking for solutions based on the clans in Gaza. I was very satisfied that finally the prime minister here started to speak about the sociology of the Middle East rather than politics, which politics is much weaker than the sociology.
Absolutely. You know, Moti, I just would like to share with you and our participants that Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs had drafted a plan that we presented to senior members of the government that emphasized the sociology of the Middle East. And I'd like to thank you publicly for having influenced and taught us for many decades how important sociology is. Maurice Hirsch was one of the lead co-authors on the on this particular draft, as well as Brigadier General Cooperwasser, Amir Avivi, and I. So we definitely push that aspect of it, which is more sociological and far less political. I want to just in the few remaining minutes that we have open the strategic aperture of our conversation to the international community and the notion of what they say in Hebrew is toda'ah, or perception, influence within the larger international picture of this very violent explosion we've had here since October 7th. And that is, in the United States, from which I just returned and to which I'm about to go to return again for a series of talks, there is the sense that Israel, in the discourse there, is actually committing the same types of crimes, quote unquote, that the Hamas had committed against Israel. So there's a question: is how, as a former, as a longtime intelligence officer yourself, how do you create a psychological awareness in the West that the Hamas is killing its own people, that the Hamas is engaging from the very beginning in deception warfare, which is Islamic warfare, Soviet warfare, Russian warfare, Chinese warfare, what they call disinformation, malinformation. How do we change the psychological perception of Israel versus the Palestinian assault on us, which is actually really damaging Israel in the West?
Well, this question is a very big question, and the answer is accordingly very big. And I'm afraid that we'll have to dedicate a whole talk about how to change the image of Israel in Western societies, which, especially in the United States, is suffering from the woke wave, as we see for a couple of years, when Israel is, and the Jews, of course, which are combined to Israel, are viewed as the oppressors, the white supremacists, and so forth. This is a very serious problem which the United States is suffering from, And the United States is actually the biggest victim of this woke ideas or ideology, which today is in the universities, as we saw in Harvard and in UPenn. And definitely the United States will suffer from this way much more than Israel, because here in Israel, we at least are more aware of our rights, more aware of our identity, the Jewish identity, and we can have different friends. If the United States turns its back to us, well, we have China, could possibly in India, and there are other parts of the world which we could side with. The United States, in my humble view, will collapse if this woke becomes the name of the social game in the United States, because this actually is against the core values of the American nation, as were formulated by the founding fathers many years ago. And therefore, if you really want to have a discussion about how to change the tide in the United States, we'll have to dedicate this question more than a few minutes.
Well, I hope you'll join us again just to talk about that, because you're absolutely right. It's a very big issue, but it is a huge question, Moti, of Israel and the Jewish people's national security. As you see, photographs on Twitter from New York, these huge violent demonstrations that have really swept across the United States and are really endangering Israel and endangering the Jewish community there.
Let me just tell you in one sentence: follow the money.
I think that leads us to Doha, if I'm not mistaken.
This follow the money. You'll find the Qatari money is poured into these woke organizations in the States, because don't forget that Qatar, which supports the Muslim Brotherhood, they see America as the biggest enemy of Islam, and therefore the Qatari money which is poured into the political arenas, poured into the academic arenas, poured into media in the United States, is definitely designed in order to destroy America, because they see America as a threat to the Islamic world.
Absolutely. Maurice, you have one last question for Moti?
And yet what's amazing to hear this morning, or the news that broke this morning, is that just yesterday, the Americans managed to sign another 10-year lease to extend the period of their army base in Qatar, the biggest army base in the Middle East, that assumingly strategic bond between America and Qatar is continuing on, even though we're seeing the disastrous impact of that Qatari money flowing into the States and into the universities and into the civil society organizations. How does that work, Moti? How do you understand that connection with America, understanding that this relationship is almost poisonous, and yet it moves on and continues on?
When Qatar pours money to the pockets of American politicians, as was exposed that Qatar is one of the supporters of the Clinton Foundation, as much as I read in the media. So how many more family foundations of politicians are being funded by Qatar? And as I said, follow the money, and you can see the affiliation of the people according to the source of money which they get.
This is great.
Qatar, Dan, is something that we're going to have to discuss extensively. Qatar has the biggest gas field in the world, and it shares that gas field together with Iran, really creating that Gordian connection as well. I think that's something that would have to devote an entire program to, if not a few, to discuss that source of funding, that source of income, and its connection really to the Iranian regime.
To the Iranian regime, as well as to what Moti has said, is to the American academic scene. This has been a subject that has been underemphasized, and we really hope that within the coming days, Moti will come back. We'll advertise it heavily with our viewers, and as long as we're talking about gas and fuel, allow me to share with our many viewers right now and participants that we at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs have taken the advice of many of our viewers and have opened up the possibility of JGive, of being able to donate online on our website to enable us to bring you really the top experts like Dr. Mordechai Kedar. We need to upgrade our equipment in order to make this a far better experience for you. It's about a little bit more than a $15,000 haul, and we're hoping that with gifts of $180 or $360, or even $1,800, if it can be done one time, we will have a group sponsorship by name for this upgraded wartime diplomacy center, and we turn to all of our friends and family across the waters if they're able to help us to achieve this upgrade. It'll be fantastic, and will enable us to even bring a better experience with just fantastic and leading experts like Dr. Kedar, whom we thank so very much for joining us today and sharing his wisdom with us. I think it's fair to say to both gentlemen, there's really no other center that has this type of daily insight, broad insight, and it's really an honor to have you all with us, and we'll look forward to having everybody tomorrow. And Dr. Kedar, I hope you will come back in the coming days and talk about what we discussed about the influence of Qatar and the influence of America.
Then I'll be honored and delighted to appear again in your very, very important pulpit.
Thank you very, very much. Deeply appreciate it. And thank you to all of our participants, Paul and Ola and Rich and Reuven and Steve and Shmuel and Shlomo and Sheldon, Vivian and oh my goodness gracious, we go, and Yehudit and Tirza Shore, Steve, Shmuel, Shlomo, Sheldon, Robert Meyer, Rich Kroll, and we go on and on. I can't mention everyone. Will be here for forever and ever. Effie Zuroff, I see her here with us, and Dion. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you ever so much, and Judith. Thank you so much. And if you guys can spare the assistance and help us upgrade, we'll be deeply appreciative for all of you. Look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Shalom from Jerusalem to wherever you are, and shalom to Moti, shalom to Maurice. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everybody.